Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favorite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside. I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. The Kyoto garden at Harrington Manor was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant cherry blossoms drifted like confetti in the Art Deco elegance of 1950s England. Every guest played their role amid the refined splendor. Then Lord Archibald Harrington was found dead beneath a blooming tree, a poisoned cup of sake in his hand. Police saw a simple suicide, but Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this theater of cherry blossoms was playing the role of innocent, the role of murderer. The curtain rises to Chapter 1. The stage is set. The grand Harrington Manor rose like a polished jewel of Art Deco design, its white marble facade catching the soft spring sunlight of 1952. At its heart lay the Kyoto garden, deliberately crafted to mirror Japanese serenity, with cherry trees in full, delicate bloom. Pink petals drifted lazily on the breeze, blanketing stone paths and floating across the calm koi pond like scattered confetti. Guests in silk evening gowns and fine tweed suits strolled and conversed, in their laughter ringing soft and measured, as though every word had been rehearsed for the occasion. Lord Archibald Harrington, the host and passionate collector of Japanese antiquities, glided among his visitors with the ease of a seasoned leading man. His prized collection, ancient katanas displayed on velvet, fragile porcelain in lit cabinets, turned every drawing room into an extension of his personal stage. Yet beneath the surface elegance, the unspoken tensions moved like shadows wading in the wings. The air carried rich notes of Chanel perfume blending with the sweet fragrance of fresh, hothouse roses arranged in tall crystal vases. Hercule Poirot arrived precisely as invited, his small figure immaculate in a dark tailored suit, his famous moustache twitching faintly as he took in the scene. He had come as a guest of honor, his detective fame preceding him like an invisible spotlight. Tilting his egg-shaped head, and he studied the guests with quiet intensity. "Mon ami," he murmured to Captain Hastings at his side, "observe. This garden is no mere decoration. It is the stage, and here human nature will perform its drama." The afternoon unfolded in gentle luxury. Champagne corks popped with delicate sounds, crystal glasses tinkling as toasts were offered. Guests savored the dry, icy bubbles, the chill contrasting pleasantly with warm sunlight filtering through pink blossoms. But Poirot accepted a cup of strong continental coffee. Its rich, bitter taste lingered on his tongue, while he noted the crisp texture of linen napkins and the smooth coolness of crystal stems. From the terrace came the low, comforting crackle of a wood fire, sending curls of smoke into the air. Then came the scream, sharp, sudden, slicing through the polite murmurs like a missed cue. Lady Victoria Harrington stumbled from the secluded cherry grove, her silk gown whispering against stone as she clutched a bench for support. "He's dead. Archibald is dead." Her voice quavered, perfectly pitched for tragedy. Guests hurried forward, shoes crunching over petal-strewn gravel. Poirot moved swiftly despite his small stature, green eyes bright with focus. Beneath the largest sakura tree lay Lord Harrington, lifeless, one hand still curled around a porcelain sake cup. A faint, unmistakable odor of bitter almonds, cyanide, drifted upward. Police arrived soon after, heralded by the soft thud of closing manor doors and the solemn chime of the grandfather clock inside. The initial verdict was swift: suicide. A folded note in the victim's pocket spoke of crushing debts and despair. But Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve with precise small hands and made a quiet, expressive gesture. Mais non, this is no ordinary departure from the stage. The poison in the sac was given with care, the body arranged just so, and the petals around him undisturbed. This, mes amis, was directed. He turned to the stunned gathering, voice calm yet commanding. The crime scene is now our theater. Each of you, an actor in this unfolding play. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. Is it truth or theater? The principal players stepped forward into the light. Lady Victoria Harrington, the grieving widow, silk-clad and trembling just enough. Mr. Takashi Yamamoto, the Japanese rival collector, calm yet watchful, like a trace of Cuban cigar smoke clinging to his tweed. Miss Eleanor Voss, the devoted young secretary, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. Dr. Reginald Black, the family physician, voice steady and professional. Mrs. Beatrice Lang, the bitter sister-in-law, smile tight as stretched canvas. Each wore their assigned mask with skill, but Poirot's gaze missed nothing. Inspector Japp, broad-shouldered and brisk, waved the crowd away. Plain as day, the fellow took his own life, debts, despair, and the usual. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Ah, Inspector, you see the props, the note, the cup, but Hercule Poirot observes the performance. The pose too artistic, the timing too perfect. This was no solo exit, it was staged. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how Lady Harrington's hands tremble, yet her eyes stay perfectly dry. The first questions began, Poirot guiding them like a director shaping scenes. The sun dipped lower, bringing a chill terrace breeze that contrasted the earlier warmth. Cigar smoke lingered faintly. Furniture wax and polished mahogany scented the manor halls. Rain began to tap gently on leaded windows as guests withdrew to the drawing room. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon. Miss Voss twisted her soft kid gloves, mascara miraculously intact. This role of sorrow, Poirot murmured. It is played, but not felt. Dr. Black avoided the corpse's direction. Mrs. Lang's tight smile never reached her eyes. Ah, but you say, Poirot reads too much into small gestures. Bear with me. The fire crackled warmly inside, banishing the cold night air. Piano notes drifted distantly. The careful observer, and you are becoming careful, mon ami, will notice how Mrs. Lang twists her napkin, betraying the strain beneath her calm. The stage was set. The actors had taken their places. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The morning light fell softly across the Kyoto garden, turning fallen cherry petals into pale pink carpets that muffled every footstep. Harrington Manor had woken to a hushed stillness, the crime scene now cordoned with discreet police tape that fluttered like forgotten stage ribbons. Inside, the library had been chosen as the interrogation room, its polished mahogany shelves gleaming under warm lamplight, and the scent of old leather bindings mingling with fresh furniture wax and the faint trace of last night's wood smoke. Hercule Poirot sat at the massive desk, a small porcelain cup of strong continental coffee steaming before him. The bitter richness coated his tongue as he arranged his notebook and pen with perfect symmetry. Captain Hastings stood by the tall window, watching raindrops trace slow paths down the leaded panes. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9 times, each note deep and deliberate. "Today, mon ami," Poirot said quietly, "we invite each actor to step forward and deliver their opening scene. We shall see who remembers their lines and who forgets." The first to enter was Lady Victoria Harrington, playing the grieving widow with practiced grace. Her black silk mourning dress rustled softly as she settled into the velvet chair opposite Poirot. A single strand of pearls caught the lamplight. Her kid gloves rested folded in her lap like props waiting for their cue. "Tell me, Madame," Poirot began, tilting his egg-shaped head, "the final moments you shared with your husband yesterday." She described a tender farewell beneath the cherry tree, his hand brushing hers, a quiet promise to speak later about finances. Her voice trembled at exactly the right moments. Yet when she raised the lace handkerchief to her eyes, Poirot noted no moisture darkened the fabric, so the mascara remained flawless. "Observe, mon ami, this suspect plays her role too perfectly." Next came Mr. Takashi Yamamoto, the Japanese rival collector. He carried with him the faint, rich aroma of Cuban cigar smoke that clung to his excellent tweed suit. He bowed slightly before sitting, hands resting calmly on his knees. "Lord Harrington and I were competitors in business," he said evenly, "but never enemies. Yesterday we spoke briefly of a 17th century Tsuba. That was all." Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his hands. "And yet, monsieur, a fragment of your cigar ash was discovered very near the body. You claim you did not approach that part of the garden?" A tiny pause, barely a missed beat, before Yamamoto answered. "I walked the paths earlier. The wind must have carried it. The mask slips. Did you catch it?" Miss Eleanor Voss followed, young and apparently fragile, in a simple grey dress. She twisted a crisp linen handkerchief between her fingers until the fabric creased. The scent of lilies from a nearby vase drifted toward her. "He was kind to me," she whispered, "like a father. I last saw him at 3:30 near the koi pond. He seemed tired, but not despairing." Poirot watched how her gaze flicked toward the window whenever she mentioned the victim's name. A delicate blush rose beneath her powder. "You watch with Poirot, no? You see how her eyes avoid returning to mine?" Dr. Reginald Black entered next, carrying the sharp, clean note of sandalwood cologne. He sat with the relaxed posture of a man accustomed to being believed. "I examined the body at once," he stated. "Cyanide, rapid, unmistakable. The sock cup still held traces. Suicide is the obvious conclusion. The note confirms it." "Obvious," Poirot repeated softly, "is a word often used by those who wish the audience to look no further." He leaned forward slightly. "You carry cyanide in your medical bag, and doctor?" "For rare cases of neuralgia, in tiny controlled doses, perfectly legal." Ask yourself, why does this helpful physician keep his eyes fixed on the desk rather than on Poirot? Finally, Mrs. Beatrice Long, the sister-in-law, strode in wearing rough tweed that spoke of country practicality rather than London elegance. Her smile was thin, her handshake firm. "Archibald and I disagreed about money. Frequently," she admitted without hesitation. "But murder, absurd. I was in the rose garden with Miss Voss from 4 o'clock onward." Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "And yet, Your footprints were found closer to the cherry grove than the roses would allow. Her jaw tightened, just for a second. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles, lies flow smooth. As each interview ended, contradictions began to surface like poorly hidden stage wires. Lady Harrington said her husband left her at 3:45. Yet Miss Voss claimed she saw him alive at 4:10 near the pond. Yamamoto insisted he smoked only on the upper terrace, yet ash lay within 10 feet of the body. Dr. Black described the suicide note as in the victim's usual hand. Poirot had already observed slight variations in pressure and slant. Mrs. Lang and Miss Voss swore they never left the rose garden together, yet a gardener reported seeing only one woman there briefly. Poirot arranged the small stack of notes symmetrically before him, his green eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. Rain tapped insistently against the window panes. Inside, the fire crackled and sent warmth curling through the room. A distant piano played a slow, melancholy waltz that drifted under the door like an ironic commentary. Ah, but you say, these are only small inconsistencies. Bear with me, the careful observer, and you are becoming careful, mon ami, will notice how Dr. Black's fingers drummed once, very lightly, when the word cyanide was spoken. A reflex, a tell. The library grew warmer as the morning wore on. Champagne had been replaced by strong coffee. Its heat contrasted the chill that seeped from the terrace doors left ajar. Every suspect had now taken their mark, delivered their prepared lines. Yet already, the performance showed strain at the seams. Every actor had taken their mark. But who played truth and who played lies? The Chapter 3. The first act. By early afternoon, the rain had eased into a fine mist that clung to every cherry blossom like tiny glass beads. The Kyoto garden looked almost too perfect, too still, after the morning's revelations. Poirot walked the gravel paths alone for a time, small polished shoes, leaving faint impressions among the petals. The air smelled of wet earth, bruised roses, and the lingering trace of Cuban cigar smoke that seemed to follow Mr. Yamamoto wherever he moved. And inside the manor, the atmosphere had thickened. Guests avoided the drawing-room windows that overlooked the fatal cherry tree. The grandfather clock struck the half-hour with slow, deliberate chimes. Poirot returned to the library, smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, and began to apply gentle but relentless pressure. First, he summoned Miss Eleanor Voss again. She entered clutching a small leather-bound notebook, her secretarial record of the weekend. Her fingers left damp marks on the cover. You say you saw Lord Harrington near the koi pond at 4:10, Poirot reminded her softly. Yet Lady Harrington insists he left her side at 4:15 and never returned to the main lawn. Miss Voss swallowed. I may have mistaken the time. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. Or perhaps you saw someone else near the pond at that hour. Her eyes widened, only for a fraction of a second, before she dropped her gaze to the carpet. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. Is it truth or theatre? Next, Poirot asked Mr. Yamamoto to explain once more why a second fragment of his cigar ash had been discovered inside the small summer house, only 12 paces from the body. The wind, Yamamoto repeated. But this time the word sounded thinner. The wind, Poirot echoed, does not carry ash through closed lattice doors, monsieur. A muscle moved in Yamamoto's jaw. Now for the first time, his calm mask showed the faintest hairline crack. The mask slips. Did you catch it? Dr. Black was questioned about the precise quantity of cyanide kept in his medical bag. He answered smoothly at first, until Poirot produced a small glass vial found tucked behind books in the library. This vial contains potassium cyanide crystals, Poirot said mildly. The label is in your handwriting, Doctor. And yet you told Inspector Japp you carried only dilute solutions for medical use. Black's knuckles whitened on the arms of the chair. That must be an old preparation. I forgot it was there. Ask yourself, why does a man who prides himself on precision suddenly suffer from forgetfulness? Mrs. Beatrice Lang entered last. She refused the offered chair and stood with arms folded tightly across her rough tweed jacket. I've nothing more to say, she declared. I was with Miss Voss in the rose garden. That's my final word. Poirot arranged 3 small objects on the desk with perfect symmetry: a petal, a cigar band, a torn corner of notepaper. Curious, he murmured, that the gardener saw only one woman among the roses at 4:15. And that woman wore black silk, not tweed. Mrs. Lang's lips pressed into a bloodless line. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon. Late in the afternoon came the first significant fracture. A Poirot gathered the 5 suspects in the drawing room. Velvet curtains had been drawn against the grey light. A low fire crackled and sent warmth curling through the room. The scent of furniture wax mingled with the faint bitterness of cooling coffee left untouched on side tables. He placed the suicide note in the center of the mahogany table. This document, he announced, it was not written by Lord Harrington. He pointed to 3 tiny details. The pressure of the pen varied unnaturally in the final sentence. The lowercase was formed in a way the victim never used, and most damning, the ink was still faintly tacky when the body was discovered. Someone wrote this note after the death, Poirot said. Someone who wished the performance to conclude with a neat bow. Silence fell, broken only by the soft ticking of the mantel clock and the distant patter of renewed rain on the window panes. You watch with Poirot, no. You see how 5 pairs of eyes now avoid meeting each other. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. Late afternoon light filtered through the tall drawing room windows in pale watery shafts. The rain had stopped, leaving the Kyoto garden glistening. Every cherry petal wore a tiny prism of water. Inside Harrington Manor, the atmosphere had grown heavier than the damp air outside. Velvet curtains had been half drawn, turning the room into a shadowed stage lit only by firelight and a few silk-shaded lamps. Hercule Poirot stood near the mantel, small hands clasped behind his back, watching the 5 remaining players take their places on sofas and armchairs arranged in a loose semicircle. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 4 with slow, unresonant notes that seemed to mark the beginning of a more dangerous act. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began quietly. The first act has shown us cracks. Now we test the scripts you have each prepared. Truth requires no rehearsal. Lies always do. He turned first to Lady Victoria Harrington. She sat very straight, black silk dress catching flickers from the fire, a glass of untouched champagne resting on the small table beside her. You maintain, madame, in that you parted from your husband at exactly 3:45 and did not see him again until the discovery. Correct, she answered, chin lifted. Poirot tilted his head. Yet the head gardener insists he saw a woman in black silk standing beneath the cherry tree at 3:55, alone. with Lord Harrington. Her fingers tightened around the crystal stem. The champagne inside trembled once, sending tiny bubbles racing upward. Observe, mon ami, this suspect plays her role too perfectly. Next he faced Mr. Takashi Yamamoto. The Japanese collector sat with one leg crossed over the other, a thin blue line of cigar smoke still clinging to the tweed of his sleeve, even though he had not lit one since lunch. Your alibi, monsieur, depends on the statement that you remained on the upper terrace, smoking from 3:30 until almost 4:15. That is so? Poirot made a small expressive gesture. Unfortunately, the terrace ashtray was empty, and but near the summer house, much closer to the body, 2 fresh stubs were found, both Cuban, both yours. Yamamoto's eyes narrowed fractionally. Someone must have taken them from the terrace and discarded them there. Someone, Poirot echoed softly. Or perhaps the same someone who wrote a suicide note in ink, still wet when the police arrived. The mask slips. Did you catch it? Miss Eleanor Voss was next. She had changed into a simple wool dress, the color of winter twilight. Her hands lay knotted in her lap. You claim you were never out of the rose garden after 3:50. I was with Mrs. Lung the entire time. Poirot produced a single pale pink rose petal he had picked up earlier. He laid it on the low table before her. This petal was found caught in the buckle of Lord Harrington's shoe. It is from the hybrid peace rose, only planted in the main rose garden, not near the cherry trees. Yet you say you never left that garden. Her breath caught audibly, or she looked at the petal as though it might bite. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how quickly innocence can begin to sweat. Dr. Reginald Black leaned forward, elbows on knees, attempting the posture of professional reason. I've told you already. I administered no poison. The cyanide in my bag was for legitimate use. Poirot lifted a small brown glass vial between thumb and forefinger. Firelight flashed along its curve. This vial was hidden behind books in the library. Her fresh fingerprints, yours, cover it. And yet you told Inspector Japp this morning that you had not touched your medical bag since yesterday noon. Black's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I must have checked it earlier and forgotten. Forgotten, Poirot repeated, letting the word hang like smoke. A physician who forgets where he keeps poison. Most interesting. Ask yourself, why does this man of science suddenly develop such convenient amnesia? Finally, Mrs. Beatrice Lang. She had not sat down. She stood with arms folded, rough tweed jacket buttoned to the throat, as though armored against the warmth of the room. I've said all I intend to say. Poirot arranged 4 small objects in a perfect line on the table. The forged note, a cigar stub, a rose petal, the cyanide vial. These are not random props, madame. They form a pattern that points to rehearsal rather than spontaneity. Mrs. Lang's jaw worked. You're trying to trap us all? No, Poirot answered gently. I am merely shining the spotlight. Truth does not mind bright light. Lies always blink. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles. Lies flow smooth. The room grew very quiet, except for the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional pop of sap in the logs. The scent of furniture wax and smoldering applewood drifted through the warm air. From the hall came the faint, melancholy notes of someone playing the piano, slow and almost funereal. Poirot moved to the center of the semicircle. Each of you has delivered lines prepared with care. Yet every script contains at least one flaw. One moment when the actor forgets to guard the mask. He looked slowly from face to face. Lady Harrington's champagne glass now stood empty, drunk in 3 quick, nervous sips. Yamamoto's fingers drummed once, twice, then stilled. Miss Voss stared at the rose petal as though willing it to vanish. Doctor, Black's collar had darkened with perspiration, despite the mild temperature. Mrs. Lang's folded arms had begun to tremble very slightly. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, then made a small bow toward the assembled cast. Rehearsed lines can be very convincing until pressure is applied. Then the performance falters. Then the truth, no longer needing rehearsal, steps forward. He turned toward the fire, though letting the warmth play across his face. Ah, but you see, surely these are still only small contradictions. Bear with me, mon ami. The careful observer, and you are becoming careful, will notice how 5 masks that were flawless this morning now show the first fine lines of strain. Rehearsed lines began to falter. Truth needed no rehearsal. Chapter 5. The Mask Slips. As dusk settled over Harrington Manor, the Kyoto garden took on an almost theatrical melancholy. Our lanterns had been lit along the winding paths. Their soft amber glow turned drifting cherry petals into floating sparks of rose and gold. The koi pond reflected trembling circles of light. A chill night air moved through the open French doors of the drawing room, carrying the clean scent of wet earth and the faint, sweet perfume of night-blooming jasmine that climbed the stone walls. Hercule Poirot had requested the entire cast gather once more beneath the fatal cherry tree itself. A police tape had been removed at his insistence. Tonight, the garden was again the stage. 5 figures stood or sat in a loose circle on wrought iron chairs dragged from the terrace. A single hurricane lamp burned on a low table, its flame protected by glass, flickering across strained faces. Poirot stood a little apart, small hands clasped behind his back, green eyes reflecting the lantern light like polished jade. Now, mesdames et messieurs, he began in a voice so quiet it forced them all to lean forward. We have reached the moment when masks become unbearable. One of you will no longer be able to sustain the performance. He turned first toward Miss Eleanor Voss. Mademoiselle, he said gently, your role has been the devoted, innocent secretary, the girl who loved her employer like a father. A touching performance. Yet love, when genuine, though is rarely so tidy. He produced from his pocket the half-burned fragment of a letter she had tried to destroy in the library fireplace 2 nights earlier. Even charred, several words remained legible in a man's firm hand. My dearest Elena, if only you understood how completely. Voss's hand flew to her mouth. A small, choked sound escaped her. Poirot continued, without raising his voice. You were not merely his secretary. You were his secret, and then when he would not, or could not, leave his wife for you, love turned to pain. Pain turned to rage. Rage sometimes turns to poison. Tears spilled at last. Real tears. The first genuine moisture anyone had seen on her face since the body was found. Mascara ran in thin black tracks down her cheeks. Her shoulders shook with sobs that were no longer rehearsed. I didn't kill him, she whispered. I swear I didn't. I loved him. I hated him. But I didn't kill him. The mask slips. Did you catch it? And this time it fell of its own weight. The others stared, frozen. Poirot let the silence stretch, broken only by Voss's uneven breathing and the soft plink of water dripping from an overhanging branch. He turned next to Dr. Reginald Black. Doctor, your performance has been masterful. The calm professional, the helpful friend who merely wishes to clarify the medical facts. Yet helpful men do not hide vials of poison behind library books. Black's face drained of color. I told you. That was an old preparation. Poirot raised one small hand. No. The vial was purchased 6 weeks ago. The chemist's receipt was in your wallet. You signed for it in your own hand. Black surged to his feet. This is outrageous. I will not stand here and be accused. You will stand, Poirot said, suddenly sharp, because the truth has grown tired of waiting in the wings. He stepped closer. The lantern light threw his shadow long and thin across the grass. Consider the psychology. On Doctor, a man supplies poison. He supplies motive, unpaid gambling debts, threats of exposure. He supplies opportunity, checking the victim's health under the cherry tree, slipping cyanide into the sake while pretending concern. And then he supplies the performance, shock, outrage, helpfulness. Magnifique. But one detail betrays you. Poirot lifted Black's right hand, the one that had held the sake cup when the body was examined. Your hand never trembled, not once. And a man who discovers his patient dead by poison, his own poison, would tremble. The body knows terror, even when the mind commands calm. Your body refused to play the part. Black's knees buckled. He sank back into the chair, face working. Sweat glistened on his forehead despite the cold air. I only wanted the money, he rasped. I never meant. I thought he would collapse later, not die so quickly. The confession hung in the night air like smoke. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. And the mask has fallen completely. Beneath it, the true face at last. Lady Harrington gave a small, incredulous laugh that turned into a sob. Yamamoto stared at the ground. Mrs. Lang pressed a gloved hand to her mouth. Miss Voss wept silently now, head bowed. Poirot made a slow circle, regarding each of them. Greed performed as concern. Rejection performed as loyalty. Fear performed as innocence. But the stage is small. The spotlight is merciless. And truth, mi ami, never needs a mask. He stopped before Dr. Black. You administered the poison. You forged the note, your handwriting disguised, but not perfectly. You arranged the body so the scene would suggest despair. Every step was calculated. Every step was a performance. And every performance, eventually, forgets its lines. Black looked up, eyes hollow. I didn't want him dead. I only wanted him frightened. Yet he is dead, Poirot said simply, and fear has become guilt. The lantern flame dipped as a night breeze moved through the garden. Somewhere in the distance, the piano began again, slow, mournful notes that drifted like a requiem. You watch with Poirot, no? You see how one mask's fall changes every other face in the circle. Ask yourself, how long can any of us sustain a role when the spotlight burns? The tension that had coiled for days now snapped like a taut wire. No one spoke. The only sounds were Voss's quiet sobs, but the drip of water from branches, the crackle of the lantern wick, and the soft rustle of silk and tweed as people shifted, no longer certain which role they were supposed to play. Poirot drew himself up, still small, yet somehow filling the space. The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. Night had fully claimed Harrington Manor, and the Kyoto garden lay in darkness, save for the soft glow of paper lanterns strung along the paths like floating lanterns in a Japanese ghost story. Cherry petals drifted silently onto the black surface of the koi pond. Inside, the library had become the backstage area. Curtains drawn tight, only two green-shaded reading lamps and the low crackle of the fire providing illumination. The scent of furniture wax mingled with the lingering bitterness of cold coffee and the sweet trace of night-blooming jasmine carried in through a cracked window. Hercule Poirot moved among the shelves like a director inspecting props after the actors have left the stage. He had summoned each suspect individually once more, not to accuse, but to peel back the final layers of scenery and reveal what had been hidden in the wings. First came Lady Victoria Harrington. She entered wearing a heavy velvet dressing gown, the color of old port, and the silk lining whispered against the parquet as she walked. "You knew of your husband's affair with Miss Voss," Poirot said without preamble. She did not flinch. "Of course. Wives always know. I chose dignity over scandal." "And the gambling debts, the blackmail notes from Dr. Black." Her lips curved in the smallest, bitterest smile. Archibald thought he could hide them in the study safe. "I've known the combination since our wedding day." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "I saw you perform the grieving widow while already planning your freedom." "Freedom," she repeated softly, "is a word one learns to whisper. Observe, mon ami, this suspect plays her role too perfectly. Yet tonight, the performance has become confession." Next entered Mr. Takashi Yamamoto. He carried no cigar tonight. The rich Cuban scent had finally faded from his tweed. He stood very straight. "The katana Lord Harrington purchased from my family in 1947, he said quietly. "Was stolen from a temple during the war. My grandfather never forgave the dishonor. I came here to reclaim it, legally, through negotiation." Poirot produced a small photograph from his pocket. The blade in question, displayed proudly in Harrington's collection catalogue. "You argued with him under the cherry tree at 3:40. The groundsman heard raised voices, Japanese and English." Yamamoto bowed his head once. He refused to return it. "I left angry, that is all." The mask slips. "Did you catch it?" Our anger performed as calm business. But the eyes remember. Miss Helena Voss returned still red-eyed from the garden confrontation. She clutched a small packet of letters, tied with faded ribbon. "He wrote to me for 2 years," she whispered. "Promised we would leave together when his finances recovered. Then..." He stopped answering. The last letter said only that it was impossible. Poirot opened the top envelope with care. The ink was smudged, as though by tears, not hers. "Impossible because of money?" he murmured. "Or because Lady Harrington discovered the correspondence?" Voss's shoulders sagged. "Both, I think." "You watch with Poirot, no? You see how love can rehearse betrayal without ever speaking the lines aloud. Dr. Reginald Black was last. He looked 10 years older. The sharp sandalwood cologne could no longer mask the sour smell of fierce wet. I lent him money for his collection," Black said hoarsely. "He promised repayment with interest. When he defaulted, I kept records. I threatened exposure unless he paid." Poirot arranged the blackmail letters on the desk in precise rows. You supplied the cyanide to frighten him into payment, but he drank it before you could stop him. Black covered his face with both hands. I never meant murder, only pressure. Ask yourself, why does a man who deals in life and death so easily forget that poison does not negotiate? Poirot stepped back, it regarding the invisible web that now stretched between them all. Greed linking Black and Harrington, rejected love linking Voss and Harrington, dishonor linking Yamamoto and Harrington, control and resentment linking Victoria and her husband, family jealousy linking Beatrice Lang, who had quietly confessed earlier to forging one threatening letter in a misguided attempt to force a will change. Every string led back to the cherry tree. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. The rain began again, tapping insistently on the window panes like impatient stagehands demanding the curtain. The grandfather clock chimed 11 in the hall, slow, solemn, final. Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his hands. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. And behind every motive, the human heart, performing its oldest role, survival at any cost. Chapter 7. The final act. The drawing room of Harrington Manor had been transformed into a formal theatre for the last scene. Every velvet curtain was drawn tight against the night, shutting out the rain that now drummed steadily on the windows. A single crystal chandelier burned low, casting pools of warm light across polished mahogany and deep crimson carpets. And the fire in the grate crackled with steady purpose, sending the scent of applewood smoke curling through the air. Champagne stood untouched in iced buckets. Coffee had gone cold in porcelain cups. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 9. 9 slow, solemn notes that seemed to mark the hour of judgment. All 5 suspects sat in a semicircle of high-backed chairs. No one spoke. The only sounds were the soft rustle of silk, the occasional creak of old wood, and the muffled patter of rain. No, Hercule Poirot stood at the center, small and immaculate, his green eyes gleaming like polished jade under the chandelier light. He had arranged a low table before him, with 4 key pieces of evidence laid out in perfect symmetry. The forged suicide note, a half-burned love letter, a vial of cyanide crystals, and a single Cuban cigar stub. Mesdames et messieurs, he began in a voice quiet yet carrying to every corner of the room. You have each performed for Hercule Poirot, some with truth, most with artifice. The time has come to review the performances. Let the spotlight fall. He turned first to Lady Victoria Harrington. You, madam, played the grieving widow, the tears on cue, the trembling handkerchief, the dignified collapse into silk cushions. A technically perfect portrayal of sorrow. Bravo. Yet the handkerchief remained dry. The mascara never ran. A woman truly devastated does not rehearse her grief so flawlessly. Yet you knew of the death before the scream, because you had already accepted it as liberation. The will, the debts, the freedom from a controlling husband. Grief was your costume, not your feeling. Lady Harrington lifted her chin, but her hands stayed folded too tightly in her lap. Poirot moved to Mr. Takashi Yamamoto. You performed the honorable rival, the collector who came only to negotiate, never to threaten. Calm, courteous, restrained. Yet your cigar ash lay within feet of the body, and your argument with Lord Harrington was overheard. Honor masked resentment. Resentment masked a desire for justice that became dangerous. You did not kill. but you stood too close to the edge of the stage. Yamamoto bowed his head once, a small acknowledgement. Next, Miss Elena Voss. You played the innocent admirer, the devoted secretary who loved like a daughter. The wide eyes, the trembling lip, the quiet sobs. Yet love turned to obsession. Obsession to despair when promises were broken. You burned letters in the fireplace to hide the depth of your pain. Innocent bystanders, do not destroy evidence. Your mask was heartbreak, disguised as loyalty. Voss looked down, fresh tears, real ones, falling onto her clasped hands. Poirot stepped toward Mrs. Beatrice Lang. You performed the loyal sister-in-law, blunt, practical, protective of family honor. Yet you forged a threatening letter to force a change in the will. Loyalty does not forge documents. Resentment does. And your role was concern. Your motive was inheritance. Mrs. Lang's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Finally, Poirot turned to Dr. Reginald Black. And you, Doctor, you gave the most convincing performance of all. He paused, letting silence stretch. The helpful physician, the concerned friend, the calm professional who examined the body and declared suicide with such certainty. Shock, outrage, cooperation, magnifique. You advised the police, comforted the widow. I even offered medical insight into cyanide, a flawless leading role. Poirot lifted the small brown glass vial from the table. Firelight flashed along its curve. But you made one fatal error, one tiny moment when the mask slipped completely. He stepped closer until he stood directly before Black. When you lifted the poisoned sake cup from the dead man's hand to show Inspector Japp, your fingers never trembled, not once. A doctor who discovers his patient, his friend, dead by poison, would tremble. The body knows terror. The pulse races. The hand shakes. Yours did not, because you already knew what was in the cup, because you had put it there. Black's face drained of color. His mouth opened, closed. Poirot continued, voice soft and relentless. The cyanide came from your bag, purchased 6 weeks ago. The suicide note was forged in your disguised hand. The pressure marks match your writing samples. Yet you administered the poison during a private health check beneath the cherry tree. Motive? Unpaid gambling debts, blackmail threats that had gone unanswered. You intended only to frighten him into payment. But he drank before you could intervene. Panic followed. You arranged the body, wrote the note, scattered your own cigar ash to confuse the trail, then performed innocence so perfectly that even you almost believed it. Black surged halfway out of his chair. I didn't mean you meant to control. Poirot cut in. Control through fear, control through poison. But poison does not negotiate. It kills. Inspector Japp moved from the doorway, handcuffs ready. Poirot raised one small hand. The performance is over. The curtain falls. The truth takes her bow. He turned slowly, regarding each face in turn. Lady Harrington, relief beneath the shock. Yamamoto, quiet respect. Voss, grief made honest at last. Lang, anger dissolving into exhaustion. A Black, mask shattered. Only a frightened man remaining. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. Did you see how every role collapsed when the spotlight burned too bright? You watch with Poirot, non? You see the relief on innocent faces, the terror on the guilty one. Ask yourself, how long can any actor sustain a lie when truth stands ready in the wings? The chandelier tinkled faintly as a draft moved through the room. Rain tapped on glass like final applause. The fire snapped once, and sending sparks upward. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The drawing room felt suddenly larger after the final revelation, as though the heavy velvet curtains had been drawn back to let in cold, honest air. The chandelier still burned low, but its light now seemed harsher, exposing every line of fatigue and relief on the faces around the semicircle. Rain continued to tap steadily on the tall windows, a soft, unrelentless rhythm like the last fading applause of an exhausted audience. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. Applewood smoke lingered faintly, mixing with the sharp, clean scent of wet earth drifting in from the open French doors. Inspector Japp stepped forward from the shadows near the doorway, handcuffs clicking softly as he secured Dr. Reginald Black's wrists. Black offered no resistance. His shoulders sagged, and the sharp sandalwood cologne that once announced his confidence now seemed only a thin disguise for the sour smell of defeat. He kept his eyes on the carpet, unable to meet any gaze. "Reginald Black," Japp said in a low, formal voice, "you are under arrest for the murder of Lord Archibald Harrington. You will be taken to the station where you will be formally charged." Black nodded once, a small mechanical movement. No protest, no final dramatic line. The performance had ended. The only silence remained. Poirot stood motionless at the center of the room, small hands clasped behind his back, green eyes moving slowly from face to face. He touched his magnificent mustache thoughtfully, then spoke in a voice gentle yet carrying. "The curtain has fallen. There is no encore, only truth and its consequences." Lady Victoria Harrington rose first. Her black silk dress rustled softly as she moved to the window and looked out at the dark Kyoto garden. In the lanterns along the paths had been extinguished one by one. Only moonlight now silvered the cherry petals on the pond. "I hated him sometimes," she said quietly, almost to herself, "but I never wished him dead. I only wished to be free." She turned back to the room. For the first time since the body was found, her eyes were clear. No tears, no performance. Just quiet, exhausted relief. "The estate will be sold. I shall go to Italy. Somewhere warm. Somewhere without masks." Poirot inclined his head. "Freedom, madame, is the most honest role of all." Mr. Takashi Yamamoto stood next. He buttoned his tweed jacket with careful precision, the last trace of Cuban cigar smoke finally gone from his clothes. "The katana will be returned to the temple," he said. "Honor is restored, not by revenge, but by truth." He bowed slightly toward Poirot. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You have directed a play I did not wish to star in." Poirot returned the bow. "Sometimes the best performance is the one that ends early, monsieur." Miss Helena Voss remained seated, handkerchief crumpled in her lap. Wet now, mascara streaked, no longer a prop, but a witness to real grief. She looked up at Poirot with red-rimmed eyes. "I loved him," she whispered. "Truly, stupidly. I thought if I waited long enough." Her voice broke. She took a shaky breath. "I shall go back to London. I have a cousin there. She says I can stay until I find work. Something ordinary." Poirot stepped closer and placed a small, kind hand briefly on her shoulder. "Ordinary, mademoiselle, can be the kindest role of all." Mrs. Beatrice Lang had not moved from her chair. Her rough tweed jacket was unbuttoned now. Her arms no longer folded in defense. She looked across at Victoria. "I forged that letter," she admitted in a low voice. "I thought if the will changed, if he saw how much we needed." She shook her head. "I was wrong. I was angry, but I never wanted him gone." Victoria crossed the room and sat beside her. After a moment, she reached out and took Beatrice's hand. No words, just the simple pressure of fingers against fingers. The first honest gesture between them in years. The room grew very quiet. Only the rain, the dying fire, and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock filled the space. Poirot moved to the center once more. "Mes amis," he said softly, "you have all played your parts, some with skill, and some with desperation. But the theater of crime demands one thing above all: truth. And tonight, truth has taken her bow." He looked toward the doorway, where 2 constables waited to escort Black away. "Tomorrow there will be statements, solicitors, headlines. But tonight you are no longer actors. You are only people, tired, relieved, grieving, ashamed, hopeful. And that, mon ami, is the greatest transformation of all. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. Did you see how masks, I once removed, leave the face strangely naked and strangely alive? You watch with Poirot, no? You see Lady Harrington stand taller without her widow's veil. You see Miss Voss breathe without trembling. You see Mrs. Lang's hand finally unclench. Ask yourself, what does a face look like when it no longer needs to perform? The tension that had coiled through 5 long days and nights now unraveled like a cut thread. No one hurried, no one shouted. They simply sat or stood or walked slowly to the windows, letting the cool rain-washed air touch their skin. Black was led away quietly. The front door closed behind him with a soft, final click. Poirot arranged the 4 pieces of evidence on the table one last time, symmetrically, precisely, then stepped back. "Ah, but you say, justice is cold. Bear with me." The careful observer, and you are becoming careful, will notice that justice is not applause. It is silence. It is relief. It is the moment when the spotlight goes out and ordinary light returns. No applause for this performance. Only justice. Chapter 9. After the show. Morning arrived over Harrington Manor with a gentleness that felt almost apologetic. The rain had departed during the night, leaving the Kyoto garden washed clean. Cherry blossoms, now past their peak, drifted in slow spirals to the ground, carpeting paths and pond in soft, fading pink. A sunlight filtered through the remaining branches in pale gold shafts, turning drops of leftover water into tiny prisms. The air smelled freshly of damp earth, cut grass, and the faint sweetness of lingering roses. No longer funeral, simply alive. Inside the manor, the heavy velvet curtains had been drawn wide. Sunlight poured across polished parquet floors and mahogany tables, banishing the shadows that had lingered for days. The grandfather clock chimed 8 times, bright, unhurried notes that no longer sounded like a countdown. Furniture wax and fresh coffee scented the breakfast room. A tray of croissants and strong continental brew waited on the sideboard. No champagne today, no crystal to clink nervously. Only ordinary morning light and the quiet sounds of people beginning again. Lady Victoria Harrington stood at the long window overlooking the garden, dressed in a simple grey travelling suit rather than morning silk. Her pearls were gone. Her hair was pinned plainly. She looked smaller without the weight of performance, yet somehow taller, straighter. "I've spoken with the solicitors," she said to the room at large. The estate will be sold by autumn. The proceeds will be divided fairly. Beatrice and I have agreed. She turned to her sister-in-law, who sat at the table with a cup of coffee cradled in both hands. No more pretending we are enemies. We never really were. Beatrice Long nodded slowly. Her rough tweed jacket hung over the back of the chair. She wore a soft cardigan instead. The tight lines around her mouth had softened. I was wrong about so much, Beatrice admitted. The letter I forged, the anger I nursed. I thought it would protect us. It only poisoned everything. She looked up at Victoria. I'd like to help you pack, if you'll let me. Victoria crossed the room and sat beside her. Their shoulders touched. Two women no longer playing rival roles, but simply sisters-in-law at last. Poirot, standing near the doorway with a small cup of coffee in hand, watched the exchange without speaking. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and allowed himself the smallest of satisfied smiles. Miss Eleanor Voss entered quietly, carrying a single small suitcase. She had exchanged her morning dress for a plain navy coat and skirt, practical, unadorned. Her eyes were still shadowed from grief, but the frantic tremble had gone. I'm taking the afternoon train to London, she said. My cousin has found me a position at a small publishing house, typing manuscripts, reading proofs. Nothing grand, just steady. She paused at the table and looked at Victoria. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything I kept hidden, for thinking love gave me the right to resent you. Victoria reached across and briefly squeezed her hand. You loved him honestly, she replied. That was never a crime. Go and find a life that doesn't need secrets. Voss nodded, tears welling but not falling. She straightened her shoulders and walked to the door without looking back. The click of her heels on parquet sounded lighter than it had in days. Mr. Takashi Yamamoto appeared next, already dressed for departure, tweed suit brushed, small valise in hand. He bowed once to the room. The katana has been created and will be shipped to Kyoto tomorrow, he said. The temple has accepted its return. True honor is no longer owed. He turned to Poirot. You have my gratitude, monsieur. You did not merely solve a crime. You restored balance. Poirot inclined his head. Balance, monsieur, is the finest ending any performance can have. Yamamoto smiled, small, genuine, and stepped out into the sunlight. Moments later, the sound of a car engine starting drifted across the lawn. The garden itself seemed to breathe more easily. No police tape remained. No constables patrolled the paths. The koi moved lazily beneath the surface of the pond. A single bird called from the highest cherry branch. The stage of tragedy had become, once more, only a garden. Poirot walked slowly to the open French doors and stood looking out. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Observe, mon ami, he murmured, though no one stood beside him. The theatre empties. The actors depart. Not as villains or victims, but as people carrying their own small futures. Masks removed, lines forgotten. They step into ordinary light. And that, perhaps, is the truest resolution of all. He turned back to the two women still seated at the table. Lady Harrington looked up at him. You will stay for luncheon, Monsieur Poirot? He smiled. Mais non, madame. My train awaits in London. But I thank you for allowing Hercule Poirot to direct one final scene. He made a small expressive gesture with his hands, half bow, half farewell. Victoria rose and crossed to him. Thank you, she said simply. not just for finding the truth, for letting us keep what was worth keeping. Poirot's green eyes softened. Truth, madame, does not destroy. It merely clears the stage for what comes next. He stepped out onto the terrace. The sun was warmer now. The chill of the previous nights had lifted. Behind him, the manor felt lighter. Fewer secrets, fewer shadows. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. Did you see how grief can become quiet acceptance? How anger can become understanding? How love, once hidden, can finally rest? You watch with Poirot, no? You see futures opening like paths cleared of fallen petals? Ask yourself, what role will each of them choose when no audience remains to applaud or condemn? The theatre emptied, but the lessons lingered. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. Several weeks had passed since the curtain fell on the Kyoto Garden tragedy. Hercule Poirot had returned to his small, immaculate London apartment in Whitehaven Mansions. The Art Deco elegance of the rooms, polished mahogany, symmetrical silver frames, a single vase of white lilies, felt like a quiet sanctuary after the crowded stage of Harrington Manor. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through half-drawn blinds, warming the deep burgundy carpet. A pot of tisane steamed gently on the low table beside his favorite chair. The faint chamomile scent mingled with the clean smell of furniture wax and the distant murmur of city traffic far below. A Poirot sat with legs crossed, small hands resting on the arms of the chair, a fresh copy of the Times folded neatly beside him. The telegram had arrived that morning, brief, factual, yet telling the quiet epilogue of every player. Dr. Reginald Black had been sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge had called his performance of helpful concern particularly chilling. Lady Victoria Harrington had completed the sale of the manor and departed for a small villa near Florence. Friends reported she walked daily among olive groves, unburdened. Miss Eleanor Voss now worked quietly in a Bloomsbury publishing office, typing manuscripts by day and attending evening literature classes. Her letters, the telegram noted, were signed without flourish or secrecy. Mr. Takashi Yamamoto had personally delivered the katana to its Kyoto temple. A photograph in a recent Japanese newspaper showed him bowing before the altar, face calm and unmasked. Mrs. Beatrice Lang remained in England, he helping Victoria settle accounts from afar. The two women now corresponded regularly, no longer as rivals, but as family. Poirot sipped the tisane, hot, mildly sweet, and allowed his little grey cells to review the entire production once more. Why, he wondered, do human beings prefer performance to naked truth? The answer is as old as theatre itself. Fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of seeing and being seen as we truly are. Society hands us scripts from birth. The dutiful wife, the honorable rival, the loyal kin, the helpful friend. We rehearse these rules because they protect us. They give shape to chaos. They earn applause, or at least avoid boos. Yet every mask has weight. The shoulders tire, the smile strains. The body, the body, cannot lie forever. A hand that should tremble remains steady. Eyes that should weep stay dry. Breath quickens when calm is claimed. Guilt, love, hate, and greed, they leak through the smallest cracks because the soul was never designed for eternal concealment. The psychology is merciless. What we suppress most vigorously is what eventually betrays us. I'm reminded of the case of Roger Ackroyd, that quiet village drama in King's Abbot. There, a man performed the role of loyal confidant so brilliantly that he became the narrator of his own deception. He sat beside me, spoke of grief, offered tea with steady hands. He wrote letters in a disguised yet recognizable style. Every gesture was calculated, every word chosen for effect. Yet the little grey cells noticed what the eyes missed: the diary entries too neatly phrased, the casual mentions of poison too knowledgeable, the calm too absolute in the face of sudden death. In that drawing room, the mask did not merely slip, it shattered when confronted with order and method. The killer had believed himself the director of events. In truth, he was only another actor who had forgotten that truth always waits in the wings, patient and inexorable. So it was in the Kyoto garden. Dr. Black performed helpfulness while administering death. Lady Victoria played grief while inwardly celebrating release. Miss Voss masked obsession as innocence. Yamamoto disguised resentment as honor. Beatrice Lang cloaked envy as family duty. Each believed their performance flawless, until the spotlight of scrutiny burned away the artifice. And yet, mon ami, there is mercy in revelation. When masks fall, what remains is not ruin, but possibility. Victoria finds solitude without chains. Eleanor discovers ordinary work without shame. Beatrice rebuilds kinship without forgery. Even Black, in his cell, no longer needs to pretend. Truth liberates, even when it punishes. The psychology of revelation is perhaps the most profound lesson of all. We fear exposure because we fear we are unlovable without our costumes. Yet the opposite is true. It is only when the performance ends that genuine connection begins. A trembling hand, a genuine tear, a quiet admission. These are the moments when humanity touches humanity. Masks protect, but they also isolate. Truth, though painful, reconnects. Poirot set the empty Tisane cup down with precision and leaned back, green eyes half closed in reflection. Every drama teaches the same wisdom. People perform because they believe the audience demands it. But the truest audience is the self, and the self knows when the lines are false. Guilt betrays the actor through the body. Love leaks through dry handkerchiefs. Hate tightens a jaw. Greed steadies a hand that should shake. And always, always, truth waits. Patient, inevitable. It does not shout. It simply stands in the light until the shadows retreat. He rose slowly, crossed to the window, and looked down at the busy London street below. People hurrying, each wearing their own small masks for the day's performance. Until the next theatre of crime calls, he thought. Until another cast assembles, another set of roles is rehearsed. Another moment arrives when the mask can no longer be sustained. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache with a faint, satisfied smile. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, Poirot will be watching.